Okay, could I say good evening, everybody? My name's Alex Rowley, and I co-chair the cross-party group within the Parliament on the citizens' basic income. I remember the first event I went to discuss the citizens' basic income was up at Kelty Community Centre in Fife, and because that event was happening, it's the village I live in, but because that event was happening, either BBC or STV came out and did some filming through the week there, and it showed up on the Thursday night. So when I got back home and I went for a pint down at the local bar, everybody was speaking about this citizens' basic income. So whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it gets people talking. And I remember saying at that time, and indeed in the Parliament today when we were talking about climate change, Neil Findlay, MSP, made the point that when Bevan came along and said we're going to take the recommendations of Beveridge and we're going to create the National Health Service, people would have said that's impossible. It's such a big idea, it's such a big thing to do, or indeed the welfare state itself. And sometimes I wonder, as the generations go on, whether we're more timid and less willing to actually explore big ideas that can tackle some of the big issues in society. So regardless of your point of view, hopefully tonight will be informative. So without anyone else to do, can I ask Professor Mike Danson to kick off the event and give us a presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm chair of CBINS, Citizens Basic Income Network Scotland. That today is about launching our report that came from a series of workshops which was funded by the Scottish Universities Insight Institute. We'll talk about that in a minute. So thanks particularly to Cleo, who's up here, and the other volunteers who helped put together the report. So citizens' basic income, from being a concept, an idea that's been around actually for many decades, been discussed by people, had a huge increase in interest over the last 2-3 years. Partly for some of these reasons, so extremely high levels of poverty, of inequality, low productivity, self-employed. We're heading towards 1 in 5 people in the population in Scotland are self-employed. More than 3/4 of them are in poverty because of the flexible labour market we've got and so on. We've got major issues in Scotland, in the UK, with regard to the economy, low wages, poverty, people on benefits at some of the very lowest rates in Northern and Western Europe, and we spend less per head on social security benefits than anywhere else, again, in Northern and Western Europe. Major issues that need addressed. So one radical alternative to look at has been basic income. A simple definition. This is the one we're using in Scotland. It's the one that's been adopted by the Basic Income Earth Network, which is a worldwide network of people interested in basic income, increasing. There's national, regional, city bodies, groups across the world, and this is the definition they use. Critical, it's periodic, so it's a regular payment, it's income, as in basic, it's a cash payment, so it's not vouchers for a food bank, for housing, whatever, it's actual money, cash paid to the individual. And the individual base is important, so it's not the household, it's the individual, and that's important because it empowers everybody in the household, the women, the children, older people and so forth. It's universal, everybody gets paid it. So as we'll see, that there are different terminologies used: a citizen's basic income, a basic income, a universal basic income. The universal is important. Everybody gets it, regardless of your income, regardless of your status, of your age, and so forth. And it's unconditional. You don't have to work. You don't have to be available for work or meet any other conditions. So it's unconditional, it's universal, and therefore it's non-withdrawable. So if you start to earn more income or a higher income, you don't lose your basic income. You may go into higher tax threshold, go over the threshold and so on, but you don't lose that basic income. So we put in a proposal to run a series of workshops looking at basic income in Scotland up to the year 2030 as a way to address poverty. We've spoken to people in the Netherlands and elsewhere in recent times, given presentations. They're interested in basic income, but their major focus is on workforce participation. What labour market impacts would it have? In Scotland, the big driver, we think, has been poverty. Poverty reduction and poverty alleviation, and it's come from the bottom up, from citizens themselves, through panels, people's panels and so on, across different parts of Scotland. Key, our overall proposal was to look at basic income. Could it be transformational in Scotland in the year 2030? And to do that, we want to look at policy with particular reference to these 4 key themes: employment and entrepreneurship, so capture people who might want to set up a company. Would it be a barrier to that? In employment, would you be more likely to give up work, or would you be more likely to look for work? Or would there be more subtle changes and so on? Housing, how does housing interact with basic income? Care, the disabled carers, the care experience leavers, and so forth. And the 4th major theme, human rights and equality and basic income. So potential benefits, for instance, already hinted, by making the payment to the individuals, it empowers particularly those who don't have power. Women in abusive domestic relationships, children, older people and so on. It gives them a basic income. It gives them power maybe to leave the family home if there are particular problems. And that was found in one of the American pilots anyway, where they experimented, that it increased the divorce rate, which they then withdrew the experiment because that was a bad thing, according to some. For others, they said that was a huge benefit. So it reduced inequality. It supports personal growth. If you've got a basic income, it may not be much, but it may give you enough to think about going on that course or improving yourself in other ways, maybe taking music lessons or whatever. If we think that a little bit of money won't have an effect, think of the Poverty Alliance, Child Poverty Action Group and others campaigning for a £5 a week increase in child benefit with demonstrable advantages of that for reducing child poverty in Scotland. Same sort of thing. A basic income, even if it's a small amount, may well have big effects. Concerns, for instance, once we've introduced a basic income, as some suggested, say in America, you stop all other benefits, including disability benefits, housing benefits and so on. Would that leave some worse off? That's not what's been proposed in Scotland by the pilot local authorities, by Siemens, by others. But if there's a perception out there that that is an issue, then it means we've got more advocacy, education work to do to inform people. Citizens' basic income. Who are citizens? So it should include everybody. Does it include the very young? And at what point do you give the children power over their basic income? Are asylum seekers covered? And so on. So there's a number of knotty questions, challenges in there. And if it doesn't include everybody, refugees, asylum seekers, students coming from England or whatever, then is it really a citizen's basic income? Are we excluding some inadvertently and so on? May increase entrepreneurship. One of my titles is Professor of Enterprise Policy. We know one of the big barriers to people setting up a business is the risk. I'm going to give up a job, give up my unemployment benefit to try running a business. Well, if I've got a basic income, which is there and I know it's there, then it may well increase entrepreneurship. It takes away that risk. But for small businesses, if people are now have a basic income, they don't have to come and work for me for the minimum wage, they feel, because they've got a basic income which allows them to pick and choose more, it empowers them in the labour market, then maybe it puts other entrepreneurs under pressure, under threat? What do they do? And so on. So again, there's concerns as well as benefits. And it leaves another set of questions for discussion, for debate around the country. Although there's lots of questions, one thing that really hammers home is that although it's going to take quite a number of years before any pilots are undertaken, or planned, or undertaken, or evaluated, people outside of Scotland really appreciate the thoroughness, the rigour with which this has all been discussed. I was talking in the Imagine Belfast Festival last week. It's been running for a number of years. They've now got a basic income stream every year, and it was embarrassing to get the people from the floor saying, we wish we were more like Scotland. You do things so well. You plan, you evaluate, and so on. You get consensus. Okay, so conclusions. We've got major problems of poverty and inequality in Scotland that we need to address. Scottish society, from the bottom up, a lot of these initiatives were from meetings in Kelty, Govan, etc., was people saying we need to change. So we've got an opportunity here to look at basic income as an alternative way than current social security. How are we going to evaluate it? Is it just about health and well-being? Does it go wider than that? Is it about, just about the labour market, as we're looking in the Netherlands?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike. And I'm sure if you hold those thoughts just now, we will move to the panel session, and then you'll be able to come back on any of those questions as well. So our panel tonight, we've got Carlo Morelli from the University of Dundee School of Business. I was going to say on my extreme left. And then we've got Miska Simanainen, and you can correct my pronunciation if it's wrong when you come in, the Social Insurance Institution of Finland, and we have Cleo Goodman, the Citizens Basic Income Network Scotland. So we have three panellists. I'm going to ask them just to maybe very quickly just reflect on your initial thoughts, and then we'll open it up and start to take comments and questions. So Carlo, do you want to?
Okay, can you hear me? Is that okay? I'll stand up. Let me say I think I'm on the sceptical wing of all of this, so let me just make a few points on this. The idea of the universal basic income doesn't simply come from the left. I think, broadly speaking, it's welcomed amongst those who are active in issues around inequality and poverty, like myself, or in terms of campaign groups, or in terms of welfare support groups. So I think it's quite right that Mike and others have started to look at this from a progressive perspective. However, that's not the only perspective here, and I think we shouldn't be short-sighted in that. There is a very strong interest in universal basic income for a more aggressive version. So the Institute of Economic Affairs and others like this idea because of the way in which it can drive further poverty into our society and further inequalities into our society. So it's not a simple discussion to have. So the final point I'll just finish up on is I completely agree. The social security system we've got is broken, and the costs of that poverty is being borne on so many families in our society. That isn't going to be fixed by minor change. It's going to be fixed by a much more progressive form of taxation on corporations, organisations, and also on wealthy individuals. And that is going to mean a fundamental change in the way in which social security is considered. I think universality is part of that solution. Unless there's a way of protecting households from income being siphoned off to others with wealth, through rent or through low wages, then this sort of solution isn't going to provide the solution that people are looking for. But nevertheless, it's asking some really fundamental questions, and therefore I welcome the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you. Miska, welcome, and we'll just briefly hear your initial thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. In Finland, we had an experiment on basic income. It finished in December last year, and now we are in the business of evaluating it trying to dig reliable information on how this policy affected the lives of the participants. But usually it's the case that the social experiments are, well, it's quite difficult to generalize the results from the experiments, for example, to other population groups, to other models or versions of the policy, in this case other versions of basic income, and definitely to generalize to other countries, like to Scotland. So first of all, I'm really astonished by how thoroughly you have been thinking through the concept in this project that was presented here. And I'm also happy to see that the process is a kind of a deliberative and very open to the public. In Finland, this was a little bit different case because the experiment was started in a very tight schedule. So testing basic income might be quite a ambitious a goal. It's quite a big thing to test. Well, to think about testing something that would be a very comprehensive reform on the existing system. It might be a good idea to start by taking small steps, quite small steps, and try to think about how to integrate basic income into the existing system. So it's important to have the vision, about the world where we want to live in the future, and in which kind of a policy setting. But I think it's very important to think how to make small changes into the existing system that would mimic the idea of this general concept. And this is the way how you can progress in the legislative process. It will make the process much easier, but this is also a way to make experiments that can give you reliable information on the effects of the policy, and that information can immediately be used in developing your benefit system. So I will quit at this point. These were the first ideas that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And Cleo, do you want to kick off and give us your thoughts?
So I'm Cleo, and I'm a basic income advocate. I think the two pillars of basic income are universality and unconditionality. We give it to everyone, and we don't ask any questions. And that's what really attracts me to it. I kind of think you can't really go about it any other way. It's an exercise in trusting our fellow citizens, in giving people the resources they need to survive and hopefully thrive. And that's kind of how I see us all thriving as a society. I think I also kind of see basic income or some other radical redistribution of wealth and resource as an inevitability, because I just don't think the human race can sustainably exist on this planet with the stark inequalities that we see at the moment. Like, some people have access to everything they could ever want and need, and some people have access to basically nothing. I completely agree with the sort of co-opting of basic income, or the cynical reasons for wanting it. That's scary, right? That's what the problems that we're looking at the moment in our societies, in our social security system. It comes from greed and from a lack of engagement with the real core problems that people are facing. Children in poverty is not something that we should be comfortable with allowing in our societies, and we all need to find a way of advocating for changing that. And it's going to be a radical process, you know, radical change is needed. And in terms of Scotland's future, I do hope that basic income is part of it. I see it as part of it. And more than that, I feel like Scotland's the place for it, right? Like, I feel like we have the strength of character and connectedness with our policymakers and with each other to sort of want that for ourselves, for our communities and for our fellow citizens, to want that basic fulfillment of needs, to remove the most challenging situations that people are currently in. And so it'll be the first place in the world, in history, to have a full basic income for our nation. I think that would be a really exciting thing, and we're at a unique opportunity here with the feasibility studies. If everyone engages with it, if everyone unites behind this one idea, or, you know, the idea that we fulfill people's basic needs and we give them opportunity, I think that has a lot of power behind it. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Harold Wilson told us many years ago we'd all have a life of leisure. and who knows? I mean, technology is advancing at such a fast rate. What's your thoughts?
I'm somewhat sceptical about artificial intelligence removing all of our work. We've heard this before. We're all supposed to be having a life of leisure by now, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. But actually, who's going to produce these things? Well, whatever you think is going to need producing, somebody's got to produce it. And the idea that somehow mechanisation, autonomy, artificial intelligence will do this for us. Well, who's going to produce the artificial intelligence, and who's going to produce the things that artificial intelligence needs to produce for us to do? So I'm somewhat more sceptical. What we're seeing is not necessarily the removal of manufacturing jobs. We're seeing, and other forms of labour, we're seeing it distributed more widely across the globe. And that's what's happening. And that's being used as a means to drive down paying conditions in our in labour forces such as Britain. And the answer to that, I think, is actually much stronger social control in terms of trade union influence, trade union power and regulation of labour markets.
On the tech stuff, I'm not as sceptical about AI and tech removing the need for certain jobs, and actually I think that is a good thing. Like, if something can do the job that a person is spending 35, 40 hours a week doing, like, I think that's a good thing. Only if we are operating within a system that then financially supports them. It can't mean that people are left up the creek just because we are redistributing labour, you know. Like, I think making jobs worth doing is the point. And absolutely, people are still going to have to design and implement the technology, and those jobs are engaging. Those jobs are the things that people love doing, and we should be moving towards putting more people in those jobs rather than ensuring there are just enough rubbish jobs for people to go to work to engage in full employment. The idea of it being tech moguls that advocate for basic income, I do find that quite scary and quite daunting. But at the same time, I don't know, I think there's probably cynical reasons behind that. I'll say that much. And I'm cynical about the way that they operate their businesses and the way that they make money, you know, free platforms like Facebook making money off people that aren't paying for it. That's a cynical thing. But at the same time, these are the people that have entered gaps that they've seen. They are the people that are shaping the way that we, run our lives. Like, social media has been such an enormous change in the way that we view the world, the way that we absorb information, the way that we find information. And the fact that they're also looking forward at the possibility of a basic income, I think shows that it is going to be part of the future, or something similar is going to be part of the future. And I think that's all the more reason for us, the rest of us, to take it seriously when we have perhaps better intentions for what it would do for us and for people. We need to keep an eye on it. We need to be part of it. I think that's really important.
Thank you. And Miska, the last word goes to you.
Yeah, well,
You've heard what everybody had to say. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to end by continuing of that technological change still, because in Finland, when we look at the statistics on the nature of employment of different age groups, or when we look at the nature of employment for the whole population, we don't see any drastic change in the nature of job contracts. But when we look at the younger generations, there's something happening. So more people are getting their living from working for different employers and doing part-time jobs and all kinds of irregular work. So of course this is something that has to be taken into account when discussing basic income and this policy that there also the legitimacy and the public interest into this concept might increase in the future.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But will you join me in thanking our panel tonight, who've been excellent, and Professor Mike as well for the excellent presentation that he gave us. Thank you very much.